I never imagined I'd wake up one morning, drive to my own land, and see 28 fully built condos standing there like I was the trespasser. No warning, no call, no notice, just concrete, steel, and arrogance spread across property I legally owned. They smiled, waved papers they didn't understand, and told me I was too late. What they didn't know, I don't just own the land, I own a demolition company. Pouting collision. And that's when this story went from paperwork to pure chaos. I had owned that land for years. Not inherited, not gifted. I bought it, cleared it, paid every tax, and kept every legal document updated down to the last survey pin. It wasn't just property, it was an investment, a fallback, and eventually, a future project site. That's why the phone call felt unreal. A friend of mine, someone who lived 2 towns over, called and asked casually, "Hey, when did you start building condos on your land?" I laughed. I told him I wasn't building anything. There was silence on the line. Then he said the words that changed everything. "Then why are there 28 condos going up on it right now?" The first visit, shock turns to rage. I drove out there the same afternoon. What I saw still makes my blood boil. Heavy machinery, cranes, construction crews wearing branded vests, concrete foundations already cured, walls up, roof frames in place. This wasn't early construction. This was nearly finished. And right there, nailed to a temporary signpost, was the logo of the HOA, smiling, polished, confident, as if they owned the world. For a moment, I honestly thought there had been a massive clerical error. Maybe zoning confusion, maybe a boundary dispute. Then I checked the markers. The survey stakes were exactly where they'd always been. They hadn't built near my land. They had built on it. The encounter, pure arrogance. I walked straight to the site office. No yelling, no threats, just calm. I introduced myself as the landowner. The project manager didn't even look worried. He smirked. "Oh yeah," he said, flipping through a binder, "we know about you." That was my first red flag. He told me the had approved everything, and that construction was too far along to stop. According to him, the believed the land was unclaimed or abandoned. I asked a simple question. "Did you verify ownership with the county?" He shrugged. That shrug cost them millions. Paper versus ego. I went back to my truck and pulled out copies of everything. Deed, title, insurance, updated county surveys, tax payment records. I laid them on the table. The representative barely glanced at them. Instead, he leaned back and said something I will never forget. "Even if you're right, this project is too big to fail." That sentence told me everything. They weren't confused. They weren't mistaken. They were betting I'd fold. The strategy, pressure, and intimidation. Over the next few weeks, the tactics started. Emails from lawyers, letters implying eminent domain, phone calls suggesting I negotiate. Their tone was always the same, polite on the surface, threatening underneath. They told me court would take years. I'd lose money fighting. The condos were already pre-sold. One email even suggested I should be reasonable and sell the land to them at a discounted rate to avoid complications. That's when it clicked. This wasn't an accident. This was a land grab. What they didn't know. Here's what the didn't understand about me. I don't scare easily. I don't bluff. And I don't get pressured by bullies in suits. More importantly, I understand construction law better than they expected. Every illegal nail, every unpermitted foundation, every misplaced utility trench. They thought size would protect them. In reality, size made their mistake impossible to hide. The legal trap closes. I hired a land use attorney, an independent survey firm, a forensic construction inspector. Within days, we had a mountain of evidence. The never confirmed ownership, never secured right of way, never obtained valid building permits for that parcel. Their permits referenced land that wasn't theirs. That detail alone destroyed their entire case. Their confidence cracks. The tone changed fast. Calls became urgent. Emails became defensive. Meetings were requested. Suddenly, they wanted mediation. They suggested partial ownership. They offered profit sharing. They even hinted at political influence. Too late. At this point, it wasn't about money anymore. It was about accountability. The court filing. No turning back. When the lawsuit was filed, it hit the wall like a bomb. The judge issued a temporary stop work order within days. Construction halted. Machines went silent. Workers left. And there they stood, 28 unfinished condos, monuments to arrogance. The HOA's biggest mistake. During the hearing, The HOA attorney tried one last angle. He argued that demolishing the buildings would be wasteful and unfair to buyers. The judge looked unimpressed. Then came the line that sealed their fate. You don't get to improve property you don't own and then complain about the consequences. Silence filled the courtroom. The reality sets in. That was the moment the HOA realized something terrifying. They weren't negotiating from strength anymore. They weren't protected by complexity. They were trespassers. Expensive ones. The stop work order changed everything. One day, the site was full of noise, engines roaring, hammers striking, workers shouting over one another. The next day, it was silent. No machines, no crews, just 28 half-finished condos standing there like guilty secrets frozen in concrete. The HOA tried to act calm in public, but behind closed doors, panic had already set in. HOA scrambles for control. Within 48 hours of the court order, my phone exploded. Missed calls, urgent voicemails, emails marked high priority. They wanted meetings. They wanted compromise. They wanted time. One HOA board member actually said, "Let's not rush into irreversible decisions." That's when I realized something important. They still believed demolition was a threat, not a certainty. The last-minute games. The HOA's lawyers tried everything. They proposed leasing the land, buying it retroactively, temporary occupancy agreements. They even suggested I'd be responsible for displacing families who hadn't moved in yet. I reminded them of one simple fact. None of this would have existed if they hadn't trespassed. Their mistake wasn't emotional. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate negligence. And courts don't reward that. The final court order. 2 weeks later, the judge issued the final ruling. Clear, unambiguous, brutal. The HOA was ordered to vacate the property, restore the land, bear all costs. There was no appeal window long enough to save them. That's when I made the call. Calling my own company. Owning a demolition company changes how you hear court orders. To most people, demolition is an abstract idea. To me, it's logistics. I called my operations manager and said, "Clear your schedule. We've got 28 structures." There was a pause. Then he laughed. "You serious? Dead serious. Preparation. Doing it by the book." Despite what people assume, demolition isn't chaos. It's precision. We pulled permits, notified utilities, coordinated environmental inspections, scheduled safety officers. Everything was documented. I wasn't going to give the HOA one single excuse to claim misconduct. HOA's public meltdown. Once word got out, the HOA went into full damage control mode. Press releases blamed contractors. Board members resigned, for personal reasons. Lawyers stopped returning calls. Residents started showing up at meetings demanding answers. The same HOA that once acted untouchable now couldn't even agree on who was responsible. Demolition day arrives. At sunrise, my crews rolled in. Excavators, loaders, safety trucks, each machine polished, inspected, and legal. Residents stood behind barriers, filming on their phones. Some were angry. Some were silent. Some finally understood what happens when arrogance meets reality. The first wall falls. The operator received the signal. One slow push. Concrete cracked. A wall collapsed inward, not violently, but decisively. Dust rose into the air. No cheers. No shouting. Just the sound of consequences arriving. HOA representatives watch helplessly. I spotted 2 HOA board members standing at a distance. They looked smaller than I remembered. No speeches. No authority. Just spectators to their own mistake. They tried to talk to me. I didn't stop walking. Not revenge. Resolution. People online called it revenge. They were wrong. This wasn't emotional. This wasn't personal. This was restoration. The land didn't belong to condos. It belonged to me. And the law agreed. Day by day, structure by structure. Demolition took days. Each building came down methodically. Utilities disconnected. Materials sorted. Waste hauled responsibly. Even in destruction, we followed the rules the HOA ignored. The residents' wake-up call. Some future buyers showed up. They were furious. But their anger wasn't directed at me. They had contracts with the HOA, not ownership. And now they understood how badly they'd been misled. The final building. The last condo stood alone. Half-built. Empty. As it came down, there was no drama left, only closure. Dust settled. The land was visible again. Flat. Open. Mine. Aftermath. Silence from the HOA. The HOA dissolved within months. Legal fees crushed them. Insurance refused coverage. Board members vanished. The entity that once thought itself untouchable no longer existed. What this really proved This wasn't a story about demolition. It was a lesson about power. HOAs rely on assumptions, intimidation, silence. They didn't expect resistance. They definitely didn't expect consequences.